Welcome to Fruity Knitting. I'm Madeline.
And I'm Andrea.
And this is episode 147. For new viewers, Fruity Knitting is a 90-minute program that brings you knitting inspiration from around the world, as well as some extra snippets of travel, history, and storytelling that we hope adds joy to your life and brings a smile to your face.
And Madeline and I had a 2-week holiday in August, so we only had time to put out a mini episode last month. But judging from the comments, I think many of you really enjoyed meeting the young and very talented Danish designer behind Eggyo Knits, and that is Carolina Skofgard Benson. And Carolina creates the most stunning modern knitwear designs, and Madeline really enjoyed modeling them at the end of the interview.
Yeah.
That's really good to see. And during the interview, we do discuss some interesting topics that we haven't discussed before. So, for example, the cultural difference between Danish knitting patterns and knitting patterns in the English-speaking world, and also some possible reasons as to why Denmark might have such a high number of very successful hand knitting designers, given that it's a really tiny country with a small population. So if you were on holiday during August, don't forget to check out our interview with Eggyo Knits. Today we have a really full program with lesser known but very exciting and talented guests. So our feature interview is with the German artist and designer Sandra Archut, whose design name is Wollmuschi. So Sandra studied at the University of Art in Berlin, and she was an oil painter before she taught herself to knit. So she's foremost an artist who's just swapped her oil paints and brushes for wool and knitting needles, but she still thinks and works like an artist, and I found that really refreshing. And Sandra's first knitwear designs were literally knitted paintings. They're extremely impressive stranded knitting pieces, and she uses Portuguese purling to give her more freedom to work the stranded knitting flat without having to steek, because she actually doesn't want to steek. And Sandra also uses techniques that she learnt at the Art Academy in Berlin to inspire her knitted designs, and we talk about this connection as well during the interview. And as a painter, Sandra is naturally highly knowledgeable about colour, but at the same time, she also talks really openly about her own journey with colour, including the mistakes she makes and how she learns from them. I found this really, really helpful. So during the interview, we end up having a bit of a mini workshop on the importance of value when you're knitting colour work, and that was super helpful for me, and I think you'll find it really helpful as well.
Yeah. And as Mum mentioned, we both had a holiday in August for 2 weeks, and I spent my 2 weeks in the mountains of Kyrgyzstan in Central Asia. So I went there with my boyfriend, and first we hiked for 6 days, camping in a different spot every night, and then we spent 3 days on horseback. And this was truly one of the most incredible holiday trips that I've ever had in my life, and it all came about because back in April, during the Swiss Yarn Festival, I interviewed the founders of Pamir Fine Fibers. So they're a Swiss yarn company that works together with nomads and farmers in the mountains of Kyrgyzstan to produce really beautiful cashmere yarns. And we're featuring that little interview today in this episode. On top of that, I'm also going to show you some footage from my trip to Kyrgyzstan. And of course, as always, we're going to talk about some knitting projects that are new or ongoing and under construction. And we've got one finished project to share with you in Bring and Brag, and that's me. So I'm going to start with that. I've got my finished May top here by Asita Krebs. And the yarn I used is the Baby Yak Silk Blend by Mayak in the colorway Dakini. And I have to say that yarn goes very, very well with this design. And last episode, I showed you a schematic of this top and explained the calculations I had to make in order to accommodate for my tighter row gauge. I needed to add 4 extra rows for every 10 centimeters of fabric. This was really easy to do in the body, you just add length, but more complicated at the top of the garment due to the armhole and neck shaping. Mum suggested adding those rows to the thin part of the shoulder strap on both the front and back. And this would result in fewer rows in the armhole shaping, making the underarm curve shallower, but it didn't make much of a difference since there were no sleeves to fit into the armholes. So I was planning to wear this, but it's gotten a bit colder, and that's why I'm just showing it here, but you will see me wear it in the upcoming fashion show. It fits me very nicely, and I'm really happy with the end result. I think this yarn that I used fits the design perfectly because it also has a slight sheen to it thanks to the silk content. And the only thing is that although I started knitting this top, Mum's the one who actually finished it for me, so it's not quite my bring and brag.
That's true. Actually, I'd been urging Madeline to hurry up and finish this gorgeous top so that she could still wear it in summer. And I even knitted a few extra rows on for her just to get it moving along a bit. But then she went off to Kyrgyzstan to this sort of wild hiking tour that she did. And she wasn't sure whether her backpack would end up in a river or be soaked completely with rain. So we thought we didn't want to wreck the yarn, and she left it at home. And I thought, okay, I might as well just finish it for her as a surprise, which I did. And that was easy to do because it is actually a really addictive knit. But there's one thing I want to point out to you, because those of you who know the pattern may have already noticed it. So here's a close-up of Asita, the designer, wearing the original design. And you can see that the ribbing ends with 2 purl stitches before starting the lace panel. And Madeline's version has the lace panel framed with 2 knit stitches instead. So Madeline's version is a mistake. As you know, ribbing is a reversible fabric, and Madeline started knitting the lace panel on the reverse side, or the inside of the fabric. So here's a picture of what Madeline had knitted in the last episode, and this had already been reknitted a couple of times due to different mistakes, so she definitely wasn't going to unpick it and do it again when she discovered that she'd done it inside out. But I actually think it looks just as good with the 2 knit stitches framing the lace panel.
I think so too. I planned that.
So after you finish knitting the whole body of it, you just finish it with a 3-stitch I-cord bind off around all of the edges. So that's the neckline, the armholes and the hem. And I have to say that my dragon sickness started to kick in, because when I finished it and Madeline was still away, I put it on, tried it on myself, and if I'm allowed to say so, I thought it looked pretty good on me too.
But we recently discovered that you're a spring mum and I'm the autumn, so...
So you think it suits you better?
I'll lend it to you from time to time.
Yeah, maybe once or twice. Anyway, as Madeline said, we were fully expecting her to be sitting here modelling it for you today, but the weather has suddenly turned really cold. So we had to do a spontaneous fashion shoot. And because we were under time pressure, we decided that we'll just whip around the corner to our local supermarket and do it outside of there. So the very glamorous location for the fashion shoot is outside of Edeka in Offenbach.
So you met someone who set you back on your heels. Goody, goody. So you met someone, and now you know how it feels. Goody, goody. So you gave her your heart too, just as I gave mine to you. And she broke it in little pieces. Now how do you do? So you lie awake just singing the blues all night. Goody, goody. So you think that love's a barrel of dynamite. Hooray and hallelujah, you had it coming to you. Goody, goody for her, goody, goody for me. I hope you're satisfied, you rascal, you. So you lie awake just singing the blues all night. Goody, goody. So you think that love's a barrel of dynamite. Hooray and hallelujah, you had it coming to you. Goody, goody for her, goody, goody for me. I hope you're satisfied, you old rascal, you.
So we're back in Bring and Brag with a second project. I didn't actually think we would have a second project for Bring and Brag because I only finished this late last night, but I'm really happy I have finally finished it. This is the Instant Crush by Jorge Locatelli, who we interviewed in episode 146. So I'm a little bit embarrassed that I've only just finished it, because I did think I'd definitely be finished it and be wearing it for this episode. But for my holiday in August, I went on a meditation retreat, and during that time I didn't take any knitting with me at all. I had a complete break, and I think that was really good because it makes you excited to get back into your knitting again. So just to recap, this is knitted in the round, top down, there's no seaming, and it uses 2 strands of silk mohair held together, and you knit it on a 4mm needle. And a 4mm needle is pretty big, so it's a quick knit. And even if it's taken me so long. So the recommended yarn is feather from Magpie Fibres, and that's what I've used. There's 4 colours in the design, and I totally love these colours. They have a real 70s vibe, and I think they suit me very well.
They do.
And they suit you very well.
Yes. And I like that they totally fit the approaching fall season.
Yeah, they do. It's a very autumn jumper. I'm excited about wearing it, and I think it's going to go very well in my wardrobe. So as I've mentioned before, the advantage of knitting with 2 strands of silk mohair held together is that it creates a really lightweight jumper that's also very warm. And I've made mine a lot more fitted than what Jorge writes in the pattern. So I don't think mine has any positive ease. And I wanted it so fitted and also a little bit shorter so I could wear it with full skirts. But because it's such a lightweight material, it still feels super comfortable. It's still very drapey and soft. So that's one advantage of that. And also during our interview, Jorge uses this design as a demonstration for how important it is when you're doing either a raglan yoke, which is this one, or a circular yoke, that your row gauge will exactly match the row gauge of the pattern. And she also talks about how it's important to know the characteristics of the fibre blend that you're using, because that can also really affect the row gauge. And so, for example, for this design, she's designed it purely with the silk mohair blend in mind, which meant that she's used less rows in her raglan shaping than she would if she was going to use a pure wool yarn. So that's really, really important to know about. That interview is actually super educational. So if you haven't seen it, go back and watch it. So there we go, finally finished. I'm super happy with it, and I'm looking forward to wearing it on Prince Edward Island.
Yes, it'll look very nice. So coming up now is my little travel vlog where I share some impressions from my time in Kyrgyzstan, and straight after that we're going into our interview with Pamir Fine Fibres. Our journey started in Kyrgyzstan's capital, Bishkek. We were quite hungry after we arrived, so we visited Bishkek's lively food court, where we found some enticing booths offering freshly baked bread decorated with pretty patterns. And Kyrgyzstan also grows a ton of watermelons, which are sold in truckloads on the side of the road throughout the country. The strangest food I came across were these white and brown rocks called kurut. Kurut is a traditional nomadic food made of cow's or goat's milk mixed with salt and spices, and then it's dried in the sun, and when you do this it can actually last for years. I think I'm pretty open to new tastes, but when I tried these it just was way too intense for me, so I went and bought some dried apricots and dates instead. After visiting the market, we indulged in a proper meal at a restaurant of dumplings and soup, and I was surprised to come across some actual rug hooking that was hung up on the wall. And this pretty rug shows 2 horses with mountains in the background. Horses are everywhere in Kyrgyzstan. In the mountains, they are the best way to get from one valley to the next because there are very few roads. And Kyrgyz people also milk their mares to make kumuz, which is a mildly alcoholic fermented horse milk drink. And they also eat horse meat. In fact, their national dish is beshbarmak, which is typically made with horse meat or beef, noodles, potato, and topped with a yummy broth. We tried a lot of different foods in Kyrgyzstan, and occasionally there would be performances of traditional music and dance at the restaurants. This boy here is playing the komuz, which is a traditional string instrument in Kyrgyzstan. The next day we took this little bus called a marshrutka, and 7 hours later we arrived in the city Karakol, east of Issyk Lake. From there we headed to Jirgalan village to start our 6-day hike along the Aksu Traverse. Now the full hike is 9 days and 109 kilometres long, but we shortened it so that we could also go horseback riding later before flying back home to Germany. Scattered across the mountains are yurts like this one, where you can spend the night and have your meals. But to save money and lighten the load on our backs, we mostly prepared our own food using a cooker. There were lots of rivers to cross as well, and some of them are easier to cross than others. Now this one wouldn't have been too deep, but a kind local offered to carry us on horseback, so of course we said yes. One thing that really stood out to me was how remote it felt. In 6 days of hiking, we only came across one real road that cars could actually drive on, and apart from that, the nature seemed almost untouched. In fact, we slightly lost our way a few times because it's pretty easy to miss the path here. We hardly saw any other hikers, mostly just local nomads on horseback herding their animals. We later found out that many of the animals don't even belong to the nomads. Instead, farmers will pay nomads to take care of their animals during the warm spring and summer months because the mountains are a cheap source of food. And then when it gets cold, the animals are brought back down from the mountains to the villages where they came from. On our 3rd day, we reached a river where the bridge had been washed away, and I thought that perhaps we could wade across, but some locals on the other side who had passed us earlier on horseback must have thought this was a terrible idea because they came over with their horses and helped us across, so we were very grateful for that. These guys were hired by a hiking group to carry their gear from camp to camp. It had been a really long day and both of us had a light headache from the altitude, so we set up camp nearby and cooked some noodles with broth for dinner. And while cooking, it actually started to rain, but we sat it out and then we were rewarded with a beautiful rainbow. Most mornings we would wake up to horses or cattle grazing around our tent. This cow was pretty curious and even tried to chew on our tent, but then it changed its mind, luckily. And we saw so many animals living their best lives, roaming free in the mountains, with no fences, just open pastures. When we were thirsty, we would find a river or a creek nearby and use a filter to fill up our water bottles. I'd never used a filter before, so I was really impressed by how effective it was. And that is how we spent our days, walking up and down mountains, puffing and panting, and surviving on Snickers and Bounty bars because we really needed the energy. The last day was the hardest, but also the most rewarding. We walked for 9 hours up and down 2 mountain passes, and each valley had its own unique atmosphere. By the evening, my feet were covered in painful blisters, and I was more exhausted than I'd ever been in my life. We definitely pushed ourselves too far because our bodies ached for days later. On day 7, we broke off our hike and then travelled eastwards to Sonkul Lake, where the mountains are a lot drier. Here we would spend the next 3 days horse riding and staying overnight in yurts that provided us with really comfortable beds and warm meals. I'm so glad that we chose to spend our holiday in Kyrgyzstan, and I hope to go back there someday to explore the Tian Shan and the Pamir mountains in the south.
kaymalap sılasa mayda şokum cikurunup şarkıda kuşkum dedi
I'm with Marcos and Fabian from Pamir Fine Fibres, which offers high-quality cashmere yarns. They obtain their cashmere fibre directly from the shepherds in the mountains of Kyrgyzstan. Now, the company is committed to paying fair wages to the shepherds and to keeping the production process within Kyrgyzstan as much as possible to encourage the development of the cashmere industry in the country. So could you quickly tell us the story behind Pamir Fine Fibres, how you got to know each other, and discuss the company values?
Well, thank you, Malane. Well, it all started in 2010 when I was the first time in Kyrgyzstan, and I worked for various development projects. So my job was value creation. Mm-hmm. So I got to travel a lot in the country, in Kyrgyzstan, all over the place. I'm a mountaineer myself, so I'm often in the mountains. I very much like mountainous lifestyle, but these people, they really live in harsh conditions, which also from Switzerland, we just cannot imagine. So I also spent often time in yurts like that. When I then heard about their cashmere goats, the undercoat of their goats, I realized that there is a high potential of these fibers for the farmers, but also their animals and Kyrgyzstan overall. I was, for instance, shocked to hear that back then most of the cashmere was simply smuggled out to China, so the farmers did definitely not get their fair share of these beautiful fibers. Yes, this is when I started to think about how to produce a cashmere yarn that benefits both the farmers and the animals in the country.
Yeah, so that's how you started Pamir Fine Fibres, and how do you two know each other?
Well, actually, we know each other from our studies in Geneva. And already then, Marcus was having various ideas of like sustainable development work, sustainable products. So in 2014, he then actually founded Pamir Fine Fibres. And he told me all about it along the process. Mm-hmm. And in the beginning, it was just the most difficult part was actually to identify a suitable and reliable partner on ground. And early on, fortunately, we were able to establish a long-term collaboration with Kyrgyz Kashmir LLC. Now, both companies share the same values of a transparent process chain and a socially fair and environmentally friendly production, always aiming also for long-term relationships with the farmers, because that's kind of what's at the heart of our company, these relationships and that we can provide them, their lifestyle, help them to get along with their lifestyle. Also, our aim was to actually increase the value creation in Kyrgyzstan. And in 2001, our partner company actually was able to establish washing and de-hairing facilities in the capital.
Yeah, so that the industry could slowly grow the cashmere industry with him.
Exactly.
And you do that in Bishkek, right? That's in the north of Kyrgyzstan, yeah. Well, we'll get on to the production process in a second, but I'd like you to tell us a bit more about the farmers that you work with. Tell us about their farming practices and the lifestyle. You've had some personal experience of that early on.
Well, as already mentioned, Kyrgyzstan is a very mountainous country, remote, so it's double landlocked, and they have a very strong continental climate, so super cold winters, very hot summers. And farming practices are very basic, very simple, a lot of manual work, just completely opposite to what I'm used here from Switzerland.
So there's a lot of land as well.
So it's a very extensive way of farming, not intensive at all. That's just the countryside, also the nature just doesn't allow for an intensive way of farming at all. So you have wide open pastures, very few animals. You have often the feeling of untouched nature. And all the animals, so all the the goats, the sheep, the yak, the cows, horses, they all need to protect themselves with a warm undercoat during the cold winter. But the undercoat of cashmere goats or of goats in general is especially thin, curly, and long. This makes them
perfect for yarns.
Makes them the nice, beautiful, precious cashmere fibers.
Yeah, and interestingly, the goats are actually considered the animals of the poor in Kyrgyzstan. They even are used for milk or leather. And this is in sharp contrast to neighboring China, Mongolia, where there is a industrialized and subsidized agriculture and also livestock farming. And in Kyrgyzstan, it's the complete opposite to some extent. There's no government subsidies. So the farmers depend entirely on themselves or private initiatives. And now our aim was to help them, like to support them directly, and also to provide them or help improving the pasture management, the veterinary care, and also the promotion of animal welfare. If you're interested to know more about the farmers we source from, you can actually check out their portraits on our website.
Yeah.
Алай районунун айыл өкмөтүнүн Келдибек атындагы айыл өкмөтүндө жашайбыз, Сопу-Коргон айылында. Биз бу жерде жашаганыбызга 30 жылдан ашып кетти. Чалма көз негизи бүлөлүдөн болчу элек. Азыр биз ушу бала кезибизден тартып эле эчки, уй, койлор менен аралашып жүрөбүз, бирок негизги эчкиден көп түшүм бар. Эми билбесе керек, биз азыр заманда Кытайдын эмеси аралашкандан тартып эле жүнүн жеңил ойлукка тартып эле кыркып атабыз. Бирок чындыгына келгенде тарасаң бул тарактан көп пайда. Бир эле эчкинин өзүнөн сүтү, витамини балага да жакшы, эмчектеги жакшы, али балдарга. Одон сырткары бунун териси дагы пайда болуп берет экен. Мунун корголдору деле көң-пөң кылсаң, онусу деле пайда. Кыскасы эчкиден зыян тартпайсың, эчкиден пайда. Бирок биздин эчкилерибиздин бар жогу жалаң эгиз туйт. Эчкинин түшүмү жакшы, бирок эчкини да ошону карай билүү керек. Өз учурунда жемин, өз учурунда чөбүн берип жакшы карасаң, буларды дагы жанагы кана бастырбай, өз учурунда үкөлдөтүп, ден соолугун карасаң, ошончолук эчки түшүмүн берет. Онун үстүндө байкы илгерки макалдар бар го, эсиң кетсе эчки убак дегендей, эчки башка малдарга караганда тезирээк көбөйт. Эки жолу да төлдөп берет. Жаз, күз. Кыштын орто ченинде бир төлдөйт, жазга мал июнь, августарда бир төлдөйт. Ошондо байым деген адам биринчи эчки кылса болот.
Okay, so then take us through the production process in Kyrgyzstan and show us some examples of your beautiful yarns as well. I know you're wearing a jumper made from your yarns.
Yes,
you can talk
that's
about that a bit later.
Thank you. Well, our yarn comes alive when the farmers actually comb out the hair of the undercoat of their goats in spring. Then our teams go from village to village to purchase this raw cashmere, which we see here. We try to pay at least 50% higher prices than the current market prices.
Yeah.
We then bring the raw cashmere to Bishkek, where we pre-sort it, pre-clean it. Pre-sorting and pre-cleaning allows us also to, the qualities that we don't like, we resell it into the local market. Then now with the partnership with Kyrgyz Cashmere LC allows us to scour, so to wash and de-hair in the outskirts of Bishkek. For washing, we use a detergent from Europe in order to comply with European standards. Afterwards, we sent the washed and de-haired cashmere to the UK, to our spinners Archut. Archut is a family-run 4th generation spinning mill. They do something in between worsted and woolen spun, which makes our yarns very durable and stable. Currently, we'll talk about later, but we're offering a 6-ply and an 8-ply. We comb out the shortest hairs, the so-called noil. So that's why there's also very little peeling in our yarns. The goal was always to produce a yarn that, for hand-knitted products, that you want and you actually can wear on a daily basis without...
They just last forever.
They last forever. They will not fall apart.
Yeah.
Yeah, the last step is actually the dyeing, and that is done by Ettrick Yarn Dyers in Scotland. We have 14 different colors, plus one undyed natural cashmere version. As you might be able to see, this natural color here is a mix of black, brownish and white goat hair. We do not dye lighter colors because we would have to brighten up the natural color in quite an aggressive chemical manner. When it comes to weight, our 6-ply quality superior line here is in between a sports weight and a double knitted yarn. It sells at a 25 gram ball and has roughly 105 meters of yardage on it. On the other hand, our ground line, the 8-ply ground line, compares to a worsted weight yarn. It sells at the 50 gram ball and has roughly 80 meters of yardage on it. Both lines actually are suitable for a wide array of accessoires. For instance, scarves.
Very lovely scarf here.
This is made with our 8-ply ground cashmere. Or this sweater here, made of our 6-ply superior.
And is
line.
this the natural colour?
This is the natural
right here?
color, exactly.
Yeah. It's very lovely.
Then we also have these mittens here. They're actually named Forget-Me-Not. And they're the fruit of a collaboration for a knitting kit with Stone Knits, Charlotte Stone.
Yeah.
You might be familiar with her.
Yes, we are.
This cap here too is actually the fruit of a knitting kit, or a fruit of a collaboration, and is available as a knitting kit. And has been designed by Lila Lu, quite a well-known designer, a German designer.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. Your yarns are beautiful and extremely soft. And I think you said beforehand they get softer with every wash.
Exactly,
well.
yeah.
That's
The more
good
you
to
wear
know.
them, and even you can even put them in your tumbler. We've heard that from customers before. It gets softer and softer.
Well, that's great. It's been so interesting to learn about your company and the story behind it. So thank you for coming on to Fruity Knitting.
Thank you.
Sen uzaktan ısık gördün, men uzaktan ısık gördüm cegimde. Men uzaktan ısık gördüm cegimde.
Welcome back. We're happy you're here and we hope you've enjoyed the show so far. As you might imagine, creating a show like this does take a tremendous amount of time and effort. This is so much more than just a hobby for us. We actually work full-time on Fruity Knitting, and that's why we have a Patreon page. Now, Patreon is a crowdfunding platform, and it's actually our only source of income for producing this show. So Fruity Knitting only exists thanks to the generosity of some of our lovely viewers out there who decided to become Fruity Knitting patrons by making a small monthly contribution. So Patreon has really been incredible for us because Mum has been working on Fruity Knitting for 8 years now. I joined 3 years ago, and we've made 147 90-minute long episodes as well as some additional travel vlogs. So we do understand that everybody has different financial circumstances, and that's why we offer 3 different levels of support, with the lowest one starting at only $5 a month. And if you enjoy watching this show and you would like to help us to keep producing new episodes, or you just want to say thank you for the previous episodes, then we would be deeply grateful for your support. You can support us by going to patreon.com/fruityknitting and becoming a Hebridean or a Merino or a Shetland patron. Thank you very much for your support.
Yes, thank you. And we're really happy to announce that Pamir Fine Fibres are offering Fruity Knitting patrons a 15% discount off all their yarns from their online store. And they are shipping worldwide, so this discount applies to all of our patrons. And the details of the discount can be found on our Patreon page and also in our program notes on our website, fruityknitting.com. So thank you very much to Fabian and Marcus. So I have some Pamir Fine Fibres yarn here with me. This is their 6-ply sport weight yarn, which they call Superior, and this colour is Dark Orchid. I totally love this warm purple colour. It's got a little bit of red in it, or quite a lot of red in it actually. And each ball is 25 grams. It's got 105 metres in it, and I've got 12 balls in total, so that's more than enough to make quite a large size adult sweater. And I've been keeping my eye out for a really special design to knit this gorgeous cashmere yarn in. And I finally found something that I'm really excited about, and it's a little bit different from what I've done previously, or for a while at least. It's a crazy bright colourwork jumper called Do You Yoke by the UK designer Zanete Knits. And Zanete is originally from Latvia, and many of her designs feature very creative interpretations of traditional motifs from Latvian folklore. So the jumper is a top-down round yoke sweater with deep running colourwork that goes down past the sleeve separation. And this design was Zanete's first ever mystery yoke-along. So a mystery yoke-along means that the knitters would get the pattern in a series of clues. So they don't really know exactly how the jumper's going to look until they've nearly finished it. So the mystery yoke-along is over now. I think it started at the beginning of this year. So now you can just buy the pattern as a normal pattern. So this design uses a sport weight yarn, and it requires a solid main colour. And the Dark Orchid, I think, is fantastic for that purpose. And then it needs a very vibrant, high contrasting colour for the motif, and ideally one that has colour variation within the yarn. So for that, I've chosen the Spin Cycle Dyed in the Wool, which is also of sport weight yarn, and this colourway is called Midsummer. So
I was so shocked when Mum bought that, because it's just not like her to get something that looks like candy and it's all variegated.
I know. Look at it. It looks brighter and bolder than what I normally choose, but I'm actually really excited to knit something very dramatic.
Yeah, me too. I think it's going to look great.
Do you?
Yeah.
Good. You need to keep encouraging me. It's slightly out of my comfort zone. Anyway, for this design, it's really crucial to maintain a high contrast between the main colour and the colour changing yarn. So if the colour changing yarn has sections of minimal contrast against the main colour, then the pattern could end up appearing faded or washed out just in those sections. So I need your help now. Mm-hmm. So if you just hold all of these in a bunch here, but if I open up the Spin Cycle yarn and you have a look at all of the colour transitions here, every single colour and colour transition in this yarn is going to be a lot lighter than the Dark Orchid. So I'm not going to have this problem. So what they mean by this is when we're talking about value. So you can have high contrasting colours when you take two colours that are on the opposite end of the colour wheel, but you can also have high contrast in shade, in dark or light. So if you were to take a black and white photo of this, every single colour within this Spin Cycle yarn will come out as being much lighter than the Dark Orchid. So that's what they mean by that. So even though these colours are kind of in your face and out there, they both have warm undertones to them. So I think they also work quite harmoniously together.
I think so too.
So I'm very excited to knit it up, and this is going to be the project that I'll take with me when we go to Prince Edward Island.
Yeah, and you've also got to keep in mind that you're not going to have the same percentage of this crazy candy coloured yarn as the Dark Orchid, which is also has a big impact on how it looks.
Because when you look at the pattern on the design, it's not like big chunky sections, and you don't have, it's not like
fat stripes,
big stripe here. It's actually fine, delicate motifs
Yeah.
So it should look really
It's going to look super cool.
impressive,
Yeah.
hopefully. Okay.
Yes. So now we're still in under construction with my Jenny jacket. And we took some footage of Mum wearing it because I have made some progress and it's easier to see on the footage. The Jenny jacket is a chunky cardigan by the Danish designer PetiteKnit, which I'm making for my best friend Antonia. It's knitted top down in one piece, and I'm using the Knitting for Olive soft silk mohair in the colourway Dusty Rose, held together with the Tun per Gunt by Sandra, and I think the colour number is 5023. So last time I spoke about this project, I just started on the first sleeve, and meanwhile I'm nearly finished with the second sleeve because I've been working like crazy on it for the past 2 weeks, anytime I could find a spare moment. And you might be wondering, Madeleine, how is it that you're still working on this project, even though Andrea has knitted your May top for you? That's a very legitimate question.
So what's your excuse?
Yeah, my excuse is that I didn't take it with me on holiday. And that has several reasons. The first one is that it's knitted in one piece, and the more you knit, the chunkier, bigger and heavier it gets. And it's just not feasible to take this with you when you're going hiking up and down mountains all day for several days.
Totally. It weighs too much and takes up too much space.
Yeah. And my second reason was that it does rain and hail and there are rivers in the mountains. I was scared of either losing or damaging my knitting. So that's why I also didn't take my May top with me. And my final excuse is that since we've been back, we have been working very hard on fruity knitting and I just haven't had quite as much free time. But I've prioritised my knitting over some other activities, so I'm still happy with the progress I've made. And I hope to finish this within a week. Yeah, so even though it isn't finished yet, I have actually been planning on a next project. But before I tell you about that, I've just remembered Antonia is actually back from South America and we tried this on her. And I also measured her arm length to know how long the sleeve should be, and we were so thrilled to find that so far it looks like it's going to fit her perfectly.
Yay.
Although you have to keep in mind this isn't blocked yet, and I've talked about the smocking previously, and smock fabrics are supposed to grow a bit wider, but that could actually be even better.
Yeah.
So we're very happy about that. Also, when I knitted the cuff, I didn't have 3.25mm needles like I did for the hem, so I went down to 3mm needles instead, and luckily you barely noticed the difference. I just need to remember to use the same needles again on the other side. But Mum was using those needles.
We do have more needles.
Well, I knit at home. Anyway, enough excuses. I'm nearly finished with this. And I've already been planning my next project, which is going to be a sweater for my boyfriend. I was so happy when he said that it was okay for me to knit him a sweater. And we sat down together and looked at some sweater patterns on Ravelry until we came across the Wade Rundfeld by Rauma Designs. And he really liked that one best. The Wade is a circular yoke sweater with colourwork using 4 different colours, but there are only ever 2 colours per row, so it's pretty straightforward knitting. Also, there is a male and a female version of this pattern available, so if I was very motivated, I could even create a second jumper for myself and we'd have a partner look, but I'm not sure if he would go for that. The recommended yarn is the Rauma Finulgarn, which is a 4-ply fingering weight made from 100% wool. But you can also substitute with Rauma Tumi yarn, which is a blend of 50% wool and 50% alpaca, so that would be a lot softer and more drapey. I really like the look of this sweater, but then Mum pointed out to me that it's knitted bottom up, which isn't ideal for yoke colourwork sweaters.
Yeah, that's because if your row gauge isn't an exact match to the row gauge of the patterns, it's really hard for you to know exactly how deep your yoke is going to be. It could end up being a little bit shorter or a little bit longer than what you're wanting. So, for example, if you're to knit it top down, once you get to the end of the pattern and just say, for example, it's too short, it's very easy just to add some extra rows on in the main colour before separating the sleeves from the body. But if you're knitting it bottom up, you first have to knit the body and 2 sleeves to the length that you think is going to be exactly right. And then you join them together and then you knit your yoke, and only then can you try it on and see, does it fit you? And if the sleeves or the body are too long, you've got to unpick the whole yoke, separate the sleeves from the body, add or take away length from the sleeves and the body, rejoin them and knit the whole yoke again. So you can see that most people won't do that if it's not fitting exactly. And if you have a look on Ravelry at Colourwork yoke sweaters that are knitted or designed to be knitted bottom up, you'll see that a lot of them aren't actually fitting the wearers that well. So quite often, more often than not, the body's too long, it kind of hangs down too long past the bum, and there's some wrinkles in the sleeves, so the sleeves are too long. It's just too difficult, or often very difficult, to get a perfect fit. But if, like you're in love with a bottom-up yoke sweater, what you can do is you look in the pattern to the widest part of the yoke, and that's usually just after, in a bottom-up sweater, just after you're meant to have joined the sleeves to the body, and you take that stitch count and you do a provisional cast on. So then with that stitch count and that provisional cast on, you knit the yoke bottom up, and then you come back down to your live stitches, you see how the yoke is fitting and you adjust it, and then you knit the sleeves and the body top down. And instead of, you can still follow the pattern, so instead of the increases when it's bottom up, you just change them to decreases, and you can pretty well do the same thing, and then you can get a perfect fit. So we could easily do that.
Yeah, that does sound good. And maybe I will end up doing it, but I also thought, because I haven't bought the pattern or the yarns yet, maybe I could just ask you guys for some alternative pattern suggestions. If you're interested or you have any ideas, the criteria is it should be a men's sweater, it should have colour work, preferably around the yoke, and it should be knitted top down, ideally. So if you have any ideas, or you've even knitted some of these sweaters yourself, leave them as a comment below the video, because I'm sure that apart from me, lots of other knitters will appreciate the suggestions.
And you want it either in a fingering weight, sport weight, or the highest is DK. I don't think he wants it any thicker than a DK, because he gets pretty hot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Men usually do.
Madeline and I are flying to Canada in 2 weeks to cover the Prince Edward Island Fibre Festival. So the festival are paying for our flights and our accommodation so that we can come over and film the event, and also interview some of the vendors and instructors. So the last time we were on Prince Edward Island was in 2022. That was going to be the first year of the festival. Sadly, it had to be cancelled because of Hurricane Fiona. So last year, 23, was the first year. This year is the second year, and we've been invited for a second time, which we're thrilled about. So of course we said yes.
Yeah.
And in addition to filming the festival and doing interviews, we've also been asked to give a presentation. So for this event, there will be a big, beautiful buffet breakfast. Madeline and I will give our presentation. And then we'll take questions and hang out with the audience before we get back to our other filming and interviewing work.
Yeah. Yeah, so the presentation's going to be 50 minutes long and contain lots of photos and even some video clips. And it basically is about the story behind fruity knitting. So you'll learn a little bit about Mum's knitting journey, going back to early childhood, as well as what moved her to actually create this YouTube channel in the first place. And then we will also talk about my dad, Andrew, how he joined fruity knitting, what his unique contributions were to the show, and also what it's like working together as a family.
And since we've had the really great opportunity over the last 8 years of producing fruity knitting to meet many highly interesting and knowledgeable people in the fibre community, we'll also reflect back on some of our past guests during the presentation. So we've put a lot of work and effort into the presentation. We're really excited about it, and we hope to meet some of you there. Okay, so coming up now is the much awaited for interview with Sandra Archut. Sandra has a really fun personality. You're going to enjoy meeting her, and you're going to learn a lot as well. And we're very excited to announce that Sandra is offering fruity knitting patrons a 25% discount on all her self-published patterns in her Ravelry store and on her website. And during the interview, you'll see some absolutely stunning stranded colourwork masterpieces which come in a kit. And Sandra is kindly offering a 10% discount off these kits, which of course include all of the yarn, which have very stunning colours. So the details of the discount can be found on our Patreon page and also in our program notes on the website fruityknitting.com. So thank you very much to Sandra. So it's time for us to say goodbye.
Yeah, thank you for spending time with us, and we're going to see you again next month on Prince Edward Island. Bye.
Welcome to Fruity Knitting. I'm here with Sandra Archut, who is the very talented designer behind Wollmuschi. Sandra grew up in West Berlin, where she studied at the University of Arts, and her education in art, especially in painting, has really influenced and inspired her knitwear designs. And her creations often resemble knitted paintings, and they're frequently featuring animal and plant motifs, which I personally really love. So, Sandra, you have brought along some really stunning designs, which I'm thrilled to share with our audience. So thank you for coming on Fruity Knitting.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very delighted to be here.
Great. So I'd like to start with your background. You were a young teenager when the Berlin Wall came down, and that's a really incredible time in history to have experienced firsthand, and you really did experience it firsthand. So I really want you to say something quick about that for the audience, and then just briefly describe your journey to becoming a knitwear designer, and of course include how you came up with your name, Wollmuschi.
Okay. Well, it's good that you bring up my heritage, because it definitely had like an influence on me becoming a knitting designer and a person I am today. So I think it's good to mention again that West Berlin was part of West Germany, and we were the ones being enclosed. So I remember as a child, whenever we would want to travel or go on vacation, we had to cross the border, and we had we were checked at the borders, and I remember my parents were like, "Oh, don't make any jokes. Don't, we are getting close to the borders." So that wasn't a very nice experience, and it was a bit weird.
Yeah.
I also remember family visiting us. They were allowed to be over for 24 hours, and they would always bring like very bad tasting chocolate, and I was like, why bother? Our chocolate is so much better. But I wasn't aware of the fact that they didn't have much choice of like chocolate, sweets, clothing, and they would give the best they could.
Yeah.
But it was just awkward. But I think it's a good example of a child not being aware of what's going on.
Exactly.
Because I was not a political person. Yeah. I was born into the situation, and it was just a bit off.
Yeah, and just to remind people, so West Berlin was surrounded by East Berlin. So if you wanted to...
East Germany.
Germany, yes. Yeah. And so if you wanted to get to the West, you had to drive through the East. And so there was a lot of border controls, and they were checking you. And
Exactly. And, the next thing that was surely very unusual is, as you mentioned before, I was 14 when the wall came down. Yeah. And they aired it on television, and I just remember seeing all those very emotional people, and it's weird, but I didn't get what was going on. I just didn't. And my mom was like, hey, why don't you go there and see for yourself? So I did, and I took the bus, and I was pulled into this mass of people who were so excited and happy and emotional. And I was also pulled up the wall. When you see those pictures now from those days, I was a child being pulled up the wall. And I think that was the day where I understood what freedom really means. Yeah. It had a real impact. Yeah.
I know I can remember it too, being on the other side of the world in Australia and just thinking how incredibly special this time was. And you were there.
Yes, I was there.
Okay, and then after that, you went and lived in the eastern part of Berlin, which is also another incredible sort of time. So just explain that, because a lot of people had left East Berlin scared that the wall was going to come straight back up again. So tell us about that.
Absolutely, yeah. So when I was 19, I was accepted at art school. That was in West Berlin. We had like art school East and West Berlin, but I was accepted at the West Berlin art school. But rent was affordable at East Berlin. And as you mentioned before, like a lot of people had fled, or it was unsure who was the owner of a building. So you could rent a space for like 200, 300 euros a month, which was very cheap. And so a lot of young artists, like actors, musicians, students, anyone who wanted to get a fresh start or start whatever would go there. And it was a very exciting and wild time because, nightclubs were popping up like mushrooms when I was on vacation for just 2 weeks, and I would come back. There was a new restaurant and a new cafe, and everything had this very exciting atmosphere, creative, and there was also no closing hour. So this new learned freedom was very exciting, but also exhausting.
And a bit chaotic, maybe.
A bit chaotic, because I was like studying arts. I was also dancing a lot because I had ambitions to become a modern dancer. I was working at bars at night. And I was clubbing a lot. So I got completely drawn into this Berlin sphere from that time, which I think still pulls people to Berlin these days. I mean, this is the hype. We kind of created it. But I kind of got lost, and I kind of got burned out. And when I was 27, I managed to get my master's degree in arts, but I was tired. I was really tired, and I really needed a fresh start. So I moved to the Netherlands when I was 27.
Okay. And then you got into knitting, didn't you? Sort of like a bit of therapy, a little bit of calming of the mind. Was that right?
Yes, that's true. Because when I went to the Netherlands, I kind of had a fresh start. I recovered, and I got into knitting for mental reasons, to be fairly honest. And I also discovered my love for classical painting, because in Art Academy we were just doing conceptual stuff and video and performance, and but I found that classical oil painting, I just totally fell in love with it. And at the same time, I was falling in love with knitting. And I had to learn both just from the internet, YouTube tutorials, because there was no school available for me, but I developed like my skill for color and light at the same time as I did for knitting, and developed my knitting skill.
Okay, and now your name, Wollmuschi. How did that come about?
Oh, yeah. That is, I was sitting in my living room, and my brother was coming over to visit me, and he was standing in the hallway, and I was covered in knits and yarn and just really doing my thing. And he had his glass of wine, and he took a look at me, and he said like, "Du bist doch so eine echte Wollmuschi." I think the Germans will get it.
Yeah.
It would translate to yarn, pussycat, but it's not the same, because, but it refers to being an yarn and knitting addict to the core of your being.
Yeah.
And I think it's really funny. It has humor, and this is why I stayed and picked the name.
Yeah. Okay. So we've got to have a look at some of these gorgeous designs here. So could you just talk about the artist or the artistic era that inspired each of these designs, and also point out some of the interesting technical aspects of the designs?
So when I was getting into classical oil painting or oil painting in general, I was studying artists like obviously Rembrandt. The lighting is just extraordinary, and it's always a pleasure to look at his drawings and his paintings. Vincent van Gogh has been an inspiration like forever. His emotional expression with color. I've also taken quite an interest in Adriani Guény and Daniel Richter. I'm a huge fan. And though I studied more the technical aspects of classical painting, I was going into magical realism with my own paintings, which were quite big. So I painted like 2 meters by 1.5 meter. Really is my favorite format, which, you need a studio, you need a lot of brushes and paint. If you take a look now at my own pictures, I would call it kind of magical realism.
And what was the themes? Personal things from your life, or?
It's portrait, but then again, also a lot of what I experience, how I feel. So they're very private and very emotional is how I kind of experienced and see the world, I guess. Yeah.
Okay, so in front of us, we have a deer. How does this fit in?
Yeah, well, while I was studying art, I was getting more and more obsessed with knitting as well. And in the beginning, it was more like a hobby, and you develop your skills and you would already adapt a pattern to your personal needs. But when I learned stranded knitting, which in the beginning, like all of us, we learned to knit with a stick and to knit it in the round. And
to cut.
To cut it. And I felt compromised. I was like, this doesn't work. I want to, and I started to have my own ideas about my own designs. So I figured out the Portuguese method of purling the stranded knitting side. So, and when I was able to purl with freedom, and that it was easy for me to purl the stranded knitting, I was finally able to bring it all together. And like, I think the Bambisha was the first design where it did all come together, and I was like, hey, now I can knit my paintings.
Okay, yes. Okay, so unlike most people who find knitting in the round and steeking with ferrule knitting to be freedom, you found it didn't help you.
No.
And learning to purl, if people don't know Portuguese purling, it's a very, very, the yarn goes around your neck, and it's a very, very simple thumb movement. So it's easier than Portuguese knitting. In fact, I think the Portuguese prefer to purl than knit.
Yes.
So it's actually fantastic for purling with floats and catching your floats. And that gave you the freedom to actually knit in a rectangle or a square and make a painting.
Exactly. Yeah. So this is my canvas.
Okay.
Yes.
That's great. And I know people are going to want to see behind. It is very, very neat. How often are you catching floats?
Every 5 or 6 stitches.
Yeah. Okay. So that was your first transition into knitting, like knitted paintings. So
knitted paintings. And when I also made the decision to put more effort into knitting than to painting, what you can see here is that there already is a different value on both sides. So this is lighter, this is darker. This has more contrast than this ones, but also that the animals are interacting, because right now they're looking at each other. If you switch the sides, they look away from each other. So there is a bit of a story in there, but very free interpretation of the, very, I think, painterly interpretation of the trees.
Yes, and they're both different. They're not mirror images.
No,
it's a different.
No, so if you would change sides, I mean, this almost here becomes like a new own tree.
Yes,
and
this comes in a kit.
Not this one. Yeah, this one also. This one is in a kit as well.
And then underneath we have an incredible design here. So first, and I think this is an inspiration. So tell us about this design.
Well, this design, my design is called Swarms, Love and Fiber, and it's inspired by the wallpaper design of William Morris from 1957. Anyways, I'm also very drawn to the Jugendstil era, which uses a lot of organic forms. I think it reflects the beauty of nature.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So a lot of animal and plant motifs.
Exactly, yeah.
Which
Round
you've got
curves,
here.
yeah.
Okay, which is a totally stunning design. And you have lined this one.
Yeah.
And this is also coming in a kit, doesn't it?
Yeah,
This design.
right now this design, to keep it special, is just coming as a kit. I think it would make a great wedding shawl, by the way. It will be a lot of work, to be fairly honest, because when I started it, it was also hibernating for like 2 years, halfway through. As you can see, the result is just amazing.
It is really very striking. So talk about what you've got here, because I want to also show what's the top part of the shawl, which goes right around.
The Swan Rush and Irises, which is the original name. Because I had to design this part completely myself, as a transition between the two swans, and to make it a shawl, which would be long enough. So the irises are coming back in the centerpiece, and this is also where the color comes from. So this is why there's a color change. It's more like...
It's very, very beautiful.
Yeah, this one is hand-dyed also. The yarn is hand-dyed.
Okay, so I just want to show that. Let's just hold it up for this camera. If you can hold that, so you can see the center piece here, which goes around behind, and then we've got if we put the swans here and sort of hold it up there. It's so striking. What have we got next here?
Then the next design, and I think most of you might know it, is the Nachtschatten. There's the original first design is a cardigan, which we don't have here right now, but I have the cowl. And this one is inspired by a photogram. And
what is a photogram?
Oh yeah, a photogram is when you put an object directly onto light-sensitive paper, and then put the light on the paper. And then you would see the object directly, then you get
the silhouette of it.
Yes, so you get these images. And so I tried some of myself during Art Academy, but I was also when Floris Neusus, I think he was the one, he would put the photo paper outside on grass or flowers or whatever, and then he would wait for a thunderstorm to hit with the lightning, to hit the paper, and then you would get these images of grass and flowers on the paper. And I love the concept and the idea so much that I was trying to do myself on my own during Art Academy.
Okay.
And I think that was really in the back of my head when I came up with this design, because it looks like a photogram, actually.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And it first of all was a cardigan, which we haven't got here, but we're going to show you. And that's a really striking design, isn't it? Yeah. And then this came later.
Yeah. So this is the Foxy sweater, also one of my earlier designs. It's very Jugendstil as well, and I paid a lot of attention to the fox and the lines of the fox. I put really much, because there's a drawing underneath where you put the shapes, where you're looking for the right lines to make it look like a real fox. This painting idea comes back also that you see the horizontal line. I think it's very important because I wanted him to really sit on something, not just float in the air like a motif, but to be grounded, to be sitting on something. I used the duplicate stitch for a bit highlighting of the face and body.
Down on his chest, yeah.
Yeah, because sometimes I do miss the extra color in a row with just two colors. I found it still very challenging to design something that
still looks painterly.
Exactly, exactly. And
this isn't just a variegated red here. You're doing that yourself, aren't you, with two different reds?
Yes. Like in painting, again, you would mix the reds and you would not just pick one. And the darker one gives a bit more depth than the lighter red. But of course, this really is the fox color. So yeah, I changed them myself.
Yeah, okay. And on the back, these motifs are also very Jugendstil, aren't they?
Yes, I tried at least. So I really tried to keep the round shape. There could be like leaves. There are some flowers in here, and you don't have much space because you need the repetition to make it fit for more sizes.
That's a challenge, isn't it, to be able to grade something like this that is such a painting, without, and still keep it looking like a painting and even though you have to increase it a certain amount.
That's my biggest challenge, and I really try to look for shapes where I don't have to grade. This is why I love the bag, for example, or shawl design, because I don't have to grade and I can fully concentrate on this knitted painting thing.
Yes, yeah. This is fantastic. Oh, before we go on, I just, for this camera, want to hold this up. I love this fox. He's so cute.
Thank you.
He's really a beautiful fox.
Thanks.
And this is a great bag. So this is all about sustainable wool, isn't it? Or local wool to Amsterdam or to Holland?
Yeah, it's a very Dutch design because it is indeed local yarn. Of course, also the idea of a bag that can be reused. Also, again, because I have panels that are more like a canvas, I don't have to grade. So, but I wanted to design a bag and didn't really know how to do it. So I was looking at other patterns, but in the end, I think I came up with this myself. And because the construction, and you have two different sides here.
So tulips and a windmill.
Yeah, the very Dutch theme. Like this is the tulip side, this is the windmills, and this is more like a
filler flower pattern.
Yeah, it's not that important, but I kind of liked it. And what you do when you knit it is you start with the upper panel and you knit it in garter stitch, and then you pick up stitches around it. So the whole bag is actually knitted in the round. It's more like knitting a pair of socks.
Okay, so you're picking up stitches all around this garter stitch panel.
Yes.
And then you've got
the slipped stitches on the side to keep it more like a square shape. Yeah, this really helps. It's really important. Otherwise, it would be not that neat.
Yeah.
And when you're finished with a bag, so you just bind off for the side panels, and which you fold then double. There's an extra bit you knit.
Okay, so this section here it's sort of like a collar or something. It's turned over and it's a little bit extra strong.
Yes, it has a hem, and you put it inside. And in the end, so you're just left with the stitches, live stitches here and there.
Yeah.
And you use those live stitches, and then you pick up on the inside again. There's a little tutorial I made. And then you knit this in the round again.
Okay, all the way.
All the way up. And this is too long. It turned out too long. I used it so many times. It's worn out. But so you can use less yarn, make it shorter. But I'm very happy, and you do need a lining though.
Yes, this is a really nice linen lining.
Yeah, it's a natural lining as well. A friend of mine did that. I'm not good with sewing.
It's great,
but it's I love it. I wear it a lot.
Very striking.
Well, this is the Herzblut-Schal, and it's really Herzblut design.
So Herzblut translates literally as heart blood.
Yeah, it's really I had a lot of fun designing this. It's another very Jugendstil inspired piece. The colors, who knows Alfonso Mucha, he's another designer from that era, and they're completely the colors he used for one of his paintings. There again is this horizontal line, which maybe I think it's obvious, but maybe people don't see it. It's more like a sunrise, and then there are the birds flying into the sky, and this would be the colorful reflection in the water of what you see up there. But this is, again, you have only 2 colors in a row. So, this is, at least that was the idea behind the piece. Then the border is also very, very Jugendstil-like. I mean, this is one motive from here to here.
Yes.
And it has, again, this really round shapes and, like a flower. It's knit in the round, by the way. This one is knit in the round. Only the beginning is a few stitches in a row, and then you can work in the round.
It's very, very beautiful. Let's hold it up like this. We'll cover our faces.
But it's worth it.
It's very, very beautiful. Yeah. Okay, so you've been designing now for quite a while. So how have your tastes and priorities as a designer changed over the years? And what are you actually working on now?
So these days I try to focus a little bit more on garments that are really wearable and have a really nice fit as well. So next to this painterly knitting, I really like to design sweaters that are comfortable.
Yes, we all like to wear comfortable sweaters. That's so important. Okay, and what's this design in front of us?
This is the Candy Mel sweater. And, it obviously the color is melting and the bubbles are melting. It's an organic design again. I also experimented with the shape of it. So you have some really heavy decreases, which already start at the back, at the kind of here.
Yeah, the shoulder blade.
And runs down until the front. And this is more like per side, like 20-25 stitches decrease. And this gives the whole sweater a very boxy and round fit.
Okay.
And I really like to wear it. It also lengthens the back side of the sweater a bit. And but it was very comfortable. I really like it.
Yeah, it's very beautiful. I love the way the drops are kind of just melting down like that.
Yeah, and testers also have done great versions. You can also use even less colors to melt the color, even lighter color. There are some great sweaters already out there.
But these are beautiful muted tones. They just really flow into each other. This is one that's just simply 2 colors.
Yeah, this is the one that I designed before the Candy Mel. So this was the first version. It's a Sakura sweater. And there's just this idea of the melting drops in 2 colors. And the shape is very simple. It's a summer version. And this is really like the next level design from this, from the original
And
Sakura.
I really like the way you've used this sort of halo yarn, because that also helps with the melting effect, doesn't it?
Yes, and it's also a combination of mohair and Shetland yarn.
Yeah.
And sometimes I even use the same mohair color, but only change the Shetland color.
Yes.
So this is a very nice way to fade if you have one yarn which you
keep
use
consistently and just change the other.
Exactly.
That's really true. That's great. I love it. I think it's a great design. Okay.
Yes. Ooh. The Miltonia sweater.
Okay, so this is a very stark variation of what you're wearing here, the Miltonian sweater.
Yeah. This a very, very, I really love this design. The challenge here was to use a big motif on a raglan sweater. I've not seen that before. And it took me quite some time to figure out the shape so it would also fit nice, because you have one chart for the front and the back panel. Then you have a smaller chart for the sleeves. So it's actually 2 different charts which are changing, which are alternately being used. So that gives me the opportunity to not have to repeat the small panels, like to see the raglan sweaters we already know, and they're very beautiful, but I really want to create something different. And this one is also inspired by Estonian knitting, and so this is where you see The hem, it has some slip stitches, but it looks like
Braiding, really.
Braiding.
Like you've plaited your hair.
Yeah, exactly like braiding. I really like the detail. You can see it. I don't know where to show here as well.
Yeah, and also we can show it on this camera. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you have this cute picot hem, which you can either do in like you see the picots in a very different color or in the contrast color. This is in plain color, but the inside indeed would always be in the contrast color. It's a very cute detail. And another thing is that the construction also for the sleeves, you cast on quite some stitches for the body and the sleeve.
Yeah.
And if I were to use them, because I have this huge chart here, I have a lot of stitches. If I would not decrease them immediately, which you can see here, there's a heavy decrease directly after the cast on, but this gives a really nice and comfortable fit for the sleeve because you don't have all this excess fabric under your arm, but you still have
a roomy sleeve.
A roomy sleeve, but not too much. So, this is another way of...
That is really good. And I also like the way the braiding has just pulls in the sleeve, so you've got this sort of gathering effect here. A little bit of gathering, which you can also see here on your sleeve, can't you? This
exactly.
Gathering.
So this is also a method to kind of narrow the fabric without maybe necessarily decreasing a lot.
And I just think this is a great design for ample busted women. Like I'm quite flat up and down, but I can see you're more ample than me, but it really fits. Like it's perfect because a lot of people have trouble. They think, I've got to put in bust darts, or I need to increase here, but I want it smaller here. But this actually works very well for that.
Yes, and I've seen other, but you can, because there are not too many sizes, but I see that even if you would knit it in a very narrow, more fitted version, it would still fit very greatly. Yeah. So it's either a very comfy sweater, or you could also knit a more fitting version.
Yeah. Okay. So, as a painter and an artist, you're very knowledgeable about colour, but also at the same time, you often talk quite openly about your own journey with colour, including the mistakes you've made and how you've learned from them. And I really appreciate that, and I'm sure our viewers would as well. So can you offer the viewers some insights and techniques for working with colour?
When we talk about colour, I think it's the most important thing is to realize that we are actually talking about two different things, which is the color itself, like you would know it on the color wheel, but also the value of color, which means how would I see this whole thing in black and white. And this is really important for stranded work because it will give you the contrast. And in painting, painters would know how important it is to get the right value of a color rather than the right color. So you would only paint with natural lighting. You would redecorate your whole studio just to get the right lighting to paint the whole thing, because otherwise it just wouldn't work. And I think one tip I have for you is, if you ever pick or choose any yarn in the yarn store, go outside and check in daylight, because you might see a completely different thing. It's a very common mistake, because what happens then is you have artificial lighting, which would give, which would add some yellow to the tones you already picked, and then you go home and you see it in daylight, and you're like, these are completely different colors. This is about color. But if we go back to value, this is really the contrast. And I have a very good example here, because this is, as you can see in the Miltonia sweater, I've used two different kind of reds, or terracotta reds. And so one of my testers, she has used two different kinds of pink. And you would naturally think like, okay, the pinks, they belong together. They are like one color group, and the gray is another color group. So this would automatically make the pinks the contrast color and the gray the background color.
Yeah, exactly. So you would think there shouldn't be a problem with this.
No, not at all. But then if you see it in black and white, you see that the contrast is completely gone. So you are only left with a color contrast here, but not with the contrast in value.
And I've never seen this so clearly than in this example, because it just shows you they are absolutely the same value, because this whole patterning here is lost. You can't see it.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
I was kind of surprised when I printed it out and saw it. I was also wow, because you see the contrast is even a little higher in this sweater. So the red it has the same value, but even it's a bit darker than this one, but it has the same contrast. Because I think we all make the mistake. We get carried away by the color, the juiciness. Oh, it's so nice and it fits so well together.
And it's your favorite color.
It's your favorite color, which doesn't suit you at all sometimes. As you end up with knits you never wear. It's another thing about color. Only choose colors that fit your skin tone.
So you actually end up wearing and loving to wear your jumpers. Yeah.
Exactly. And here's a good example for where I also got completely carried away with the design, because I love the design and I love the colors, but I didn't pay any attention to the value.
Okay.
And you can see
because the image is stunning. It's a beautiful butterfly again, Jugendstil, yeah.
Yeah.
And with all of these circles and it's very, very beautiful, and the frill around the edge. Okay, so what's wrong with it? With the value.
Yeah, what's wrong with it is that it doesn't become a whole picture. Like this piece doesn't even exist. It's visually not there. It doesn't fit in, because you can see that here I'm grading the colors, obviously, from green to dark gray, but you can see that this green and this gray have the complete same value. So you don't see a difference in contrast. And there's enough contrast maybe from the green to the background color, but this difference is too high. There's too much difference. Though this should have also been a much darker green, so it would become a whole picture. And now it looks like this is just
cut off somehow.
Cut off. It doesn't visually fit in. And you see it with the pinks as well. Here, this is awful. This is really poorly, because there's so much contrast in what you think, oh, it's a yellow ochre thing. It will work, but it's on your needles, you're knitting, and
you don't want to unpick.
Exactly. When you're already there, you don't want to unravel. But before I would publish it, I would have to reknit the whole thing, I think. Yeah.
Well, I love the way you speak so openly about your mistakes, because we can all learn from it so well. I think that's great. So what we've got here is background colours that are changing and foreground colours that are changing.
Yes.
And with the background here, what would you say the value problem? The contrast is too strong?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There it is too strong. There's the opposite. It's not really. I mean, this is a really nice fade from the natural white to the cold pink to the warm pink, even to the yellow.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought this is why I put the color change here, because I expected it would be very visible. But it might be interesting. It's not that visible because it has the same value.
It's true. That is really true. Yeah.
Well, stick to your own rules.
But this is a beautiful, beautiful design. It deserves to be published, and people can play around with their value. And even with bad value, it's stunning. But with great value, it would just
you can make it
better.
Even more beautiful. Absolutely.
Okay. Now, the next thing is another journey with value. So you've got the pillow, bird pillow.
Yeah, that's right. Because this is another, I would say, and to be fairly honest, I'm not sure this is the value question, but what you can see is that something is off. And I couldn't even tell if it is the color or the value. The pattern is, the contrast is there, but it's not that juicy. It's not that appealing to the eye. Okay, it's there, but it's
we have
not good
to
enough.
point out first of all, it's a bird with plants, so it's also Jugendstil, and you play a lot with birds. Has that got a meaning for you?
Oh yeah, I think it refers to the Berlin thing, to the freedom thing. There's another bird design, and I couldn't let go of it. I wondered why, but this freedom issue really has become part of my knitting designs.
Yeah, okay.
Absolutely.
So I think this still is a gorgeous design, but it's not perfect for you.
No, it's not.
But this one you're really proud of. So explain how this one has worked.
So another Jugendstil design, and Color-wise, this is really inspired by Alfonso Mucha. Some of you might know him, and I strictly kept the colors because when you go to an era, this is about colors, because then you would look which colors were they using in that era, and this is purely about color. In the 70s, they would use a lot of brown and yellow and maybe
mustard.
green and mustard, and these are the typical colors of Jugendstil.
Okay, so value-wise, what has succeeded here?
What I think has succeeded, because I wanted this horizontal line. So there is a color and a value change I intended because I wanted the birds to fly. Like, this is a sky area. This is the idea of a sunset. So, and this is just a motive, but it could be like the sun rays, the rays of sun, and they're reflecting color-wise into the sea. This is also why there's the yellow in there. It's only in here. And as you can see, I've played with the colors, but again, the value here, maybe it's the same. It's a green and it's a pink, but it's the same value. So it does work. And when
the transition is going smoothly.
Yeah, also from the contrast colors, I think they're from I mean, you can see the birds, you can see the motives. Whenever there's dark spot in here, I wanted it to be that dark. I wanted the contrast to be that high because I wanted to accentuate that horizontal line, the painterly line in this piece.
And they are really the same value, aren't they?
Yes, and they're completely different colors.
But they smoothly melt into each other. Okay.
Yeah.
I think this is stunning as well. Now, there is one more jumper that I want you to show the audience. Just 1 minute.
Get it?
So this is called the Fool, isn't it?
Yeah.
I love this design. So, and this is a design which has no pattern to it.
Yeah.
As in the Colourwork has no pattern to it. So you can use up all your scraps, and it might be scary, but it's a way to really play with colour and value. I think you've done a brilliant job of it. I have seen some people's versions of it that don't, some look great and some don't quite work. Can you explain why? What choices you've done that have worked well?
I think it won't work is if you do not make enough color changes. So the trick with this one is that there's actually one, you could say one background color, like this is the pink and this is the ochre. But I did a lot of color changes and back and forth. So I would use a color and then reuse it. And sometimes really every needle I would change there were only two colors in a row, but I would change colors quite often.
So every couple of rows even?
Yeah, even every second or third row. Because if you don't do that, it might not look that...
It looks stripy more than...
It would look more
blocky.
Stripy.
Yeah.
And this looks more like an... if there has been an erosion or something, it's really...
Yeah, it looks organic, exactly.
Yeah.
Oxidation.
I like an oxidation is the word I was looking for, exactly.
Yeah.
And for this design, I also think it's really fun. This is why it's called the Fool, by the way, because you must be a fool not to use a chart. You know, it's an invitation to be foolish. And this is a really nice way to experiment with color and with value. Because sometimes you want here the trick maybe also be to have a little less
contrast.
Yeah,
so because it's going from quite strong contrast into one plain color, which is also a tweed, which is perfect.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I think once you've done a sweater like this, you know a lot more about color and value.
And just again, if you get your scraps together, take a photo, turn it into black and white, and that'll help you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's been fantastic to have you on Fruity Knitting. I've learned so much. I love the way you speak so openly. And value is really the defining difference, isn't it? When you think, well, why isn't this working? It should work.
Yes. They've done it so many times.
So that's super to have it better explained for our viewers and for me. So thank you very much for being on Fruity Knitting.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a lot of fun to be here. Thank you.
Okay, let's say goodbye to the audience.
Bye.